more on that. I'm now joined by Ellen Clifford from the campaign group Disabled People Against Cuts. Ellen, so you were in Geneva last week, and the UN, well, the quote is, they're seeing a human catastrophe. So what sort of evidence did you see being presented before this panel in order to endorse that sort of view?
We were there last week, but it was the culmination of a long process that has been going on for many years. Since 2010, disabled people have not felt listened to by the government, and without recourse to any other access to get listened to, people started sending things to the UN. So the committee last week said it was the most challenging exercise in the history of the committee. They've received over 2,000 pages of evidence, and to get the committee to listen to things, you have to present evidence quite robustly. So statistics as well as case studies. The mountain of evidence about the regression of disabled people's rights since 2010 is overwhelming.
Human catastrophe.
Yes, it's strong, but it's true.
Yes.
Yep.
People, what, even deaths?
Benefit deaths. There have been many deaths that have been linked to benefits being stopped, so suicides or people's conditions being aggravated. It's the social care crisis. That got more attention before the election, but that focused mainly on older people. What we're seeing for disabled adults is a life that's completely curtailed, so people who are left at home, trapped indoors without access to food or water or the toilet for hours on end. It's an undignified life. It's not equal to other people, and yet disabled people are told to expect it. That's the best you can expect if you're
And the
disabled.
government says it's spending something like £50 billion on this. The second, well, in fact, the second highest amount in any other G7 country. So what's going wrong?
The government say they're spending that, but it's interesting. I think what we've seen over the last few years is a lot of convenient use of statistics. The UK Stats Authority have stamped down on the government many times and said that the way you're using statistics is actually a misrepresentation. I think that 50 billion figure is a classic example of that. So people think that's just out of work benefits. Actually, within that figure, I've seen a Freedom of Information request on that, they lump in everything. So industrial injuries is in that 50 billion figure, everything that's spent on social care. And it's very difficult to compare that figure to what other countries spend because it's so much lumped in there. I think what is more of a key indicator about where we're at is the share of national wealth. So the Institute for Fiscal Studies has said that actually the share of national wealth on disability benefits is now half of what it was in 1989, for example. I think that's more of an important thing to look at than what the government says they're spending, because we're spending more on everything.
Austerity was mentioned as one of the causes, but also Brexit. Well, Brexit isn't the government's fault, is it?
The UN were concerned about Brexit and what might be the implications. I know, for example, many disabled people are particularly concerned around the recruitment of the social care workforce and personal assistance. Freedom of movement could well be an issue in that. And for disabled people trying to survive with lower and lower packages from local authorities, anything that relates to independent living is a concern. So people are concerned about Brexit. The committee did pick up on that, but they also picked up on many other things like legal aid changes that have stopped access to justice for disabled people. They picked up on social care and independent living, which is a huge issue for disabled people. They also picked up on many of the welfare reform changes, on the impact of sanctions on disabled people, on the cuts to personal independence payments, for example.
What impact can a UN panel have then on the British government?
The Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities doesn't have any teeth. It's not enshrined in domestic legislation. I think disabled people just wanted to feel listened to, and that's why so much evidence was sent, because people just didn't know where to turn. I think people also hope that the government would be shamed. The government did send a large representation of government officials over there, so they clearly do care to some level about how people see them. They kept maintaining this position that we are world leaders, and that was good from the committee. They came down on them and they said, you can no longer call yourself world leaders. And disabled people in this country really thought, yes, you're right.
Just finally, you were in the High Court today in London. What was all that about?
So that was a case that's been taken under the Care Act of an individual disabled man whose care package has been slashed by Oxfordshire County Council following the closure of the Independent Living Fund. I think what today's ruling proved is that disabled people don't have access to justice to challenge decisions that are curtailing their basic human rights. The Disability Committee picked up on that last week. They said that the UK government cannot delegate their responsibility for human rights to local authorities. They need to be making sure that disabled people have access to their rights, and today proved that that's not happening for disabled people.
Are you confident now that things could change, things could get better, just briefly?
We hope this is a wake-up call for the government, but we also think that disabled people need to continue using whatever means we have to challenge what's happening.
Ellen Clifford, thank you very much indeed for joining us here in the studio.